Okay, here we go, part 8. Let's see, where did we leave off last time? Chris Swires and I flew to the Vision Pro in the snow at Squaw Valley. We were in Tahoe. I did pretty shitty in the contest. I got a couple pictures in the magazine, and Chris Jameson had just won the slalom and the giant slalom. And we were now going to go to a party in Tahoe Donner. Back down to earth. The mandatory post-contest party was held at someone's house in nearby Tahoe Donner. I thought I was pretty cool in my brand new Transworld Snow sweatshirt, plus I'd just competed in an invitational pro snowboarding contest. And Tom Shea, the publisher of International Snowboard magazine, came up to me with photographer John Spazzetto, who said he'd gotten some great shots of me. Hell yeah, I thought I was pretty badass. Sweeties and I were getting pushed around in this big sea of people at this house in Tahoe Donner when some girl asked us, "Who are you guys?" Swire said, "I'm Chris." And I said, "I'm Todd Richards." Well, she flattened me with one fell swoop. And this girl is Kirsten Bedard. I don't say that in the book, but it is Kirsten Bedard. I forgot what her name was, but I remembered. And Kirsten Bedard did me a service that she probably doesn't realize, but it served me my entire life. And I will go on. She flattened me with one fell swoop. "Do you always introduce yourself with your full name?" she said. I was a stuttering idiot at that point, but she went on. "Why do you have to introduce yourself as Todd Richards? Do you think I'll recognize your name or something? I don't care if you are some pro, so get over yourself." Swire slinked off, and the girl waited a second for me to respond. When I didn't, she said, "Whatever," and she melted into the crowd. I stood there swearing that I would never ever again introduce myself by my full name. This wouldn't have been so horrible if she hadn't been so right on. Truth be told, I knew there was a little bit of buzz going on about me, and I wanted to impress her. Being pro had been my biggest goal. It wasn't working out in skating, but it was looking pretty good in snowboarding, and I flaunted it a little bit. But boy, that girl chopped my ego in half. She also made me realize something very important, and that is, who cares? It's only snowboarding. When you're not on the hill, you're just like everybody else. In fact, even when you're on the hill, you're just like everybody else. Case in point, I found out later that girl was a pro snowboarder herself. There's a picture of me. That's from Squaw Valley's pipe. I think that's either the day before or the day after the Vision Pro in the snow. And just doing a little method there. Trevor Graves shot that photo, I'm pretty sure. That day, Damian Sanders was going really, 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 really big. As the night wore on, the crowd grew even bigger, and it started pitching and rolling. Then there was a blood-curdling scream. Chris Jameson, the champ of the event, had been pushed into a wood-burning stove and caught himself with both his hands. He burned both his hands. Now, you have to realize that this party in Tahoe Donner was, I don't know who lived there, but at any point, it was so packed, like you couldn't move. And like when the door would open, the whole crowd would go. Also at this party, Sean Palmer took a shit in a frying pan and put it on the wood-burning stove. Yeah, he did that too. And then, Devin Ryerson was there for that one. And yeah, then J-Mo leaned back into the stove and burned both his hands. Sketchy, super sketchy. J-Mo was rushed off in an ambulance, and I jumped at the opportunity to leave early with Mickey Keller and Lisa Vinciguerra. As we were driving down a snowy road, the headlights caught a slumped-over figure in the snow. Turns out it was Chris Roche, wasted with a bloody nose and a snowbank. We got him into the car and brought him back to the hotel. Chris had been dating a pro named Heather Mills, and during an argument, she had apparently walloped him and shoved him out of her car into a snowbank and took off. Heather, if you're listening to this, that's still one of the funniest things ever. And if anyone out there knows Heather Mills, it's super funny. I think it's hilarious. And Roach, sorry, but Heather kicked your ass and threw you in a snowbank. It's pretty hilarious. Chris would forever claim that he didn't remember anything from that night, but I never missed a chance to remind him that he got punched in the face and thrown out of a car and got his ass kicked. On the way to the airport a couple days later, I remembered that I never called my parents to let them know that I'd gotten to Tahoe okay. I've been away from home for 9 days by the time I got home, only to find out they'd been checking in with Swires' parents. They were more bummed than angry that I hadn't called. I never forgot to call and check in ever again. I think that's an exaggeration. I did check in with my mom once, because I probably needed money. I'd only been home for a couple days when Mickey Keller called and said she wanted me to go to the OP Pro at Copper Mountain in Colorado in February. Apparently, I'd done something right in Tahoe. It was the same deal. I had to get there, and Sims would cover everything else. I knew leaving again so soon was the kiss of death for my job at the ski market, so I psyched myself up to ask my parents for help. Perhaps Mickey had gotten to them first because they said they'd been saving some money for a rainy day, quite possibly a 4-year college education that I only went to for 2 years, and they were excited that my snowboarding seemed to be taking me somewhere. Swires didn't get the invite on this one, so I flew to Denver alone, then took a 3-hour shuttle up to Copper, where I recognized John Boyer, the barfoot rider I'd seen at Squaw. His nickname was John Boy Air. He was a red-haired Canadian Danny Bonaducci, your typical class clown with stand-up potential. And we ended up going over to Breckenridge to ride together to practice on the half-pipe. Actually, we all went over. The whole Sims team went over, and I think Boyer went with us. At Breck, I met Noah Selaznik, one of the other few pro snowboarders who was also a sponsored skateboarder. Andy Hetzel and Mike Rankle were there too, along with a couple locals named Matty Goodman and Ken Block. Yeah, the Ken Block, like the Ken Block who sent me this off his Cosworth that was in the last Gymkhana video. Thanks, Ken, for your rim. That's when you know you have real friends. They send you wheels in the mail. Anyway, I was pretty quiet riding with these guys. Even though I wanted to be a hardcore punk like Rankwit, my personality reeked of conservative East Coast guy. At the end of the day, the Breck locals started talking about going to Fort Skate in Fort Collins, Colorado, a couple hours away. This was a skateboard park that was in Fort Collins, Colorado. And Fort Collins is not close to Breckenridge at all. I immediately thought, oh shit, here's my chance. And I jumped into the back of Ken Block's black Volkswagen GTI. Now, Ken had a GTI, his black Volkswagen GTI had zebra stripes on it. So, yeah, and Ken's been driving like a lunatic since way before he became Ken Block, Gymkhana rally guy, DC owner dude. You know what I'm saying? Rankwit sat up in front, and seconds later the car was filled with smoke. Beers were cracked, and Ken was driving like an idiot, at least 90 miles per hour on winter roads. The nervous, sheltered kid in me came out. I was shitting my pants and at the mercy of a maniac behind the wheel. We were going through the Eisenhower Tunnel. This is giving you a little prelude to this one. We were going through the Eisenhower Tunnel, and I was sitting in the back seat with Matt Goodman. Ken skimmed past a row of orange traffic cones on the right-hand side of the road very quickly. All of a sudden, Rankwit yelled, "Door prize," and opened his door and whacked a cone. The entire way through the Eisenhower Tunnel, Rankwit blasted cones with Ken's passenger door. All I heard was Ken laughing and door prize, boom, door prize, boom, door prize, boom. And to top it off, I looked over at Matty, and he was picking huge boogers out of his nose and wiping them on the back of Ken's seat. Matty gave me a look like, go ahead, it's fun. So I dug in deep and started smearing boogers on the back of Ken Block's seat too. Anything to look like I wasn't scared shitless in the back of that car. Somehow we made it to Fort Skate, and some guys let us in to skate for free. Noah Selaznik at this point was riding for H Street, and he had just had was it Shackle Me Not, I think was the H Street video that came out at this point. And I'm pretty sure it was. So Noah was at like top of his game, vert dog, like super pro. I'm trying to get the light out of my face. It's really difficult because it's freaking bright outside. So Noah Selaznik showed up with Andy Hetzel, and he was doing crazy tricks like, let's see, indie gay twist nose bones, and then he'd do indie gay twist nose bone, and then chicken wing it and pull it up behind him. He was like doing crazy stuff and doing like airs to fakie where we'd hit the ceiling. He was pro, and you could tell. Matty Goodman was also a very good vert skater. Matt was really good friends with Kevin Staub, and He was wearing one of Kevin's 90 sweatshirts. Kevin's company was pretty underground, which gave Maddie instant credibility. I had a great session, installed the sad plant to fakie, which seemed what seemed like a half an hour. First one ever for me. I proved myself to these guys, which was important because there weren't too many pro snowboarders who were really good skaters back in the day. The OP Pro halfpipe contest was the next day, February 11th, and it was head-to-head. I went up against Mike Jacoby, who was all over the magazines, and just seeing his name next to mine on the board was enough to punch myself out. Pinch myself? Punch myself? Either way. The halfpipe was perfect for my hand plants, but everyone was doing airs. So I figured I better do airs too. Or maybe I should just do a hand plant. No, yes, no, no, yes. I was completely confused and dropped in with zero focus. This was back when like one trick could win your run for you, a la the J-tear. I think a lot of people won half-pipe comps by doing the J-tear, which was basically like a backflip where you kind of put your hands on the wall. Kind of Mike Jacoby invented it. My airs were kind of mediocre, and Jacoby won and advanced with his J-tear cartwheel bullshit. After my run, Sean Palmer came up to me. He was so pissed, I thought he was going to hit me, but he only said, "Shit, man, why don't you do your hand plant? You would have beat him for sure." All I could say in response was, "Fuck." I thought from here on out, I'm going to do what I'm good at, and not what everyone else is doing. Apparently, I'd become known as the Handplant Guy, because at the photo shoot after the contest, a bunch of photographers kept asking me to do them. Ken Achenbach, a Canadian writer and photographer from Whistler, BC, got a shot of one that became a double-page spread on Transworld the following January. Yes, an entire year later. That day, I was coerced into doing hand plants so Tim Wendell could air over me. Going doubles was sketchy in skateboarding and hadn't really been tried that much in snowboarding. There was like too many sharp edges being hucked around. With the cameras aimed at us, I'd stall each hand plant out until I saw Wendell riding across the flat bottom of the pipe. A lot of people thought that was pretty rad. That whole time, I was praying that I wouldn't get flattened by my doubles partner. I returned to Massachusetts in time to finish off the New England Cup at Magic Mountain on February 18th, 1990. I was surprised to see a crowd that probably topped 100 spectators, not including the competitors. There was a lot of people at that very last comp. The riders were getting better and better too. I started incorporating more switch and more fakie riding into my routine. It wasn't really called switch then, it was called fakie. With some, fakie 360s. I considered trying to spin 540s, but I couldn't risk it. My hand plants were still a crowd pleaser. And my tricks were enough to edge out Chris Swires, who was my closest competition. And actually, Smoke and Jay Quinton. Smoke and Jay and myself and Chris were like the dudes that were like 1, 2, and 3 at every comp. I won the event and was named the New England Cup half-pipe champion for the winter of 1989 and 1990. I got $300 for the overall title and another goblet. My dad's eyes were starting to open. He began attending some of these East Coast events. He saw the banners, he saw the sponsor, and he saw the teams. He liked the camaraderie and the high fives among the competitors and realized why snowboarding and skateboarding meant so much to me. It made him proud to watch me in my element, vastly different from the Little League practices he took me to when I was a kid. Then, nobody had wanted me on their team, and now I was getting attention and respect from the announcers and the competitors alike. When some of the parents and the riders noticed me hanging out with him, they'd come up and say things like, "Oh, you're Todd's dad? You get a hell of a son there." You could tell he was proud of me, and likewise, I was stoked that he was taking an active interest in my riding. Here's a picture this is a comp that was at, where's that? Snows Mountain. So that's across the street from Waterville. And that's Jason Ford before he rode for Burton. He was riding, I think he might have been riding for Barfoot at that time. And that's me doing a backsider on a kidwell and him reaching out to touch someone. International Man of Mystery. OP sponsored an International Pro Invitational Series in Canada and the US. It wasn't just in Canada, it was in the US as well. I got invited to compete, thanks to Sims and Mickey Keller, who picked me for one of their team rider slots. I'd never left the United States, so before I committed, I made sure that there would be some riders I knew attending. Dave Lemieux, Chris Swires, and I made the arduous drive to Quebec, a few hours away from Paxton. Oh, okay, this is what we're talking about. Yeah. So the OP Pro series, there was like OP Pro at June Mountain, OP Pro Copper, OP Pro Mount Avia, OP Pro Lake Louise. So there was like 4 or 5 events, and we called them the OP Pro free money giveaway because they paid down to like, I think they paid everyone. So like I was making money doing slalom and stuff. Like you would get paid. It was like everyone would just get paid. It's pretty funny. The border crossing freaked me out. I thought the guards might give me a cavity search just for the hell of it. Though innocent, I felt paranoid, and as we drove through the checkpoint, I actually turned around and thought I was taking what could be the one last look at America. The Mount Avia contest was a joke. It was pouring rain, and the pipe was unimaginably small and lame, even worse than the pipes in the New England Cup. But all the big names were there, and I placed 4th behind Rob Morrow, Andy Hetzel, and Noah Selaznik, who won. Jason Ford, in his purple pastels and Oakley factory pilot glasses, won the races, proving that he was no longer following Craig Kelly's footsteps as a diverse rider, but he was a thunderous force to be reckoned with. Thunderous is a great adjective. Nice work, Eric. The 1990 U.S. Open. The following weekend, March 29th, 1990, was the U.S. Open. My dad suggested that both he and my mom come to watch, which made me feel like I had my whole family behind me. It also increased the pressure. I really wanted to do well in front of them, and for some reason I felt that was more important to me than anything. I'm trying to see if there's a picture in here of that Mount Avia pipe. Let me see if I can find one in here, because it was really, really terrible. And there was, oh yeah, here's a picture of it. I knew that was in there. So there was like no walls, so they put like weird little obstacles in the pipe, and so that's me doing, rock and roll on top of like some weird thing in the pipe. It was really shitty. I mean, that pipe was super shitty. And that's where that picture that was in, I forget what's the damn name of the book, that book that just came out. And I had like a portrait, and I looked like a little kid like this, like, that was from there too. Here we go. I showed up a couple days early to practice. The pipe had just been built by a legendary pipe cutter who worked at Stratton, Lyle. Lyle used what we called the scooper machine to create an amazing pipe. It was basically a standard bucket loader tractor attachment, but he was the first to use it for that purpose. It was way different than the eventual pipe dragons, the pipe shaping and grooming machines of the future, but with Lyle's touch, cutting pipes was an art form. At this particular US Open, the pipe was like a brand new skate ramp with perfect transitions and the perfect amount of vert. The type of pipe that you can take one look at it and know exactly how it will perform. I'll never forget the smell of that pipe, crisp morning air mixed with the grease from the chairlifts overhead and the diesel smell from the tractor. I love that smell. I was allowed to session the pipe early by the Burton police, along with proven competitors like Mike Jacoby, Craig Kelly, Kelly Joe Lagaz, Joe Jackson, Brett Johnson, Dave Sione, and Jason Ford. Normally, the newer kids had to wait and practice with the other open class riders, but I was invited inside the fence when they saw me watching. I'd graduated from the minors, even though I still felt like a bat boy. Sims had rented a big house next to Stratton, and the first person I encountered when I got there after practice was Mario Palladini, an Italian powerhouse who rode pipe and raced equally well. I'd never really met anyone from another country before, except for English-speaking Canadians, let alone somebody who walked around the house wearing skin-tight Speedos. That's very true. Palladini he was very Euro. He was the raddest dude ever. He's rad. Mario was also one of the first guys to wear a helmet consistently in the halfpipe. And since that first contest at Tenney in 1988, when I'd gotten so much shit for it, I hadn't put mine on once. Stratton is known for its raging parties during the Open, a collision of East and West Coasts, with Europeans and the occasional Japanese rider thrown in. This was the era when... Hi, Meep. What are you doing? Meep's here. Everyone, hi. Hello. Meep the cat is here, everybody. Where are we here? Stratton was known for its raging parties during the Open, a collision of East and West Coast, with Europeans and the occasional Japanese rider thrown in. This was the era when pro riders were starting to realize they needed to be good on the mountain, but they had to rage equally as hard at bars and parties in order to establish the right reputation. After the races were over, the first 3 days of the Open, the parties started to get into full swing. I didn't want to increase the odds of puking the following morning, which was the day of halfpipe competition, so I took it easy. The butterflies in my stomach were already circling like vultures, so I called it a night early. At 3 in the morning, I was sharing a room upstairs with Tucker Franzen. At 3 in the morning, I woke to the sight of blurry humanoids all around me. One was knocking on my forehead with his knuckles. It was Andy Coughlin. What are you doing? It was Andy Coughlin, who was grumbling angrily, "Where's Palmer?" He was like knocking on my forehead. I was sleeping, and he was knocking on my forehead, saying, "Where's Palmer?" I looked around at his equally pissed off lynch mob that included Mark Sullivan and Russell Winfield and a whole bunch of other people I didn't really recognize. I thought it was a bad dream, and I closed my eyes. Coughlin whacked me on the forehead once again, looking ready to rip my head off. "Where the fuck is Palmer?" And he repeated it, and I sputtered, "I don't know, man. I don't know. I was just sleeping. I don't know." I found out quickly enough that Sean Palmer had gone to the Sunset Bay snowboard shop party and lost his wallet. Sunset Bay was a iconic East Coast shop out of Connecticut. And I rode for him, Jason Ford, Brushy. We all rode for Sunset Bay, Russell Winfield. So it was like the cool shop to ride for back east. And Palmer went to this party there because they had a rager, and he conveniently lost his wallet. After he couldn't find it, he decided that someone had stolen it. Palmer's probably not that sober at this point either, earlier in the day. When no one came clean, he threw a log through the window and bailed. Like he picked up a log and threw it through their front window. Andy Coughlin, who was sort of East Coast riders representative, didn't tolerate this kind of punk-ass bullshit in his hometown and was determined to hunt Palmer down. The mob of Burton riders left my room, banging on the walls as they tore the Sims house apart from top to bottom. They finally found Palmer passed out in a basement room with Chris Roche. Swires, Tucker Franzen, and I ran down to witness what we were sure was going to be a brawl. We saw Coughlin in the doorway to Palmer's room, and he was on fire. "You come to my house, East Coast, and you disrespect me like that with all this bullshit," he yelled at Palmer. "You can't do that shit around here." He was just screaming, like screaming. Just then, Paolo Dabini, the Italian guy, who was in the room next door, stumbled out in his banana hammock bikini bottom, rubbing his eyes and saying in a heavy Italian accent, "You can't be doing this in this house. I need to sleep. I gotta ride in the morning." He probably didn't say it like that, but he definitely was screaming at Andy Coughlin in a very thick, "It's me, Mario" accent. Yeah. Coughlin, this stopped Coughlin in his tracks. He looked Mario up and down, shook his head, and he left. I went back to sleep with a heavy heart because I figured Coughlin was pissed at me for being associated with the whole scandal. Coughlin had watched over me and all the East Coast kids. He was responsible for hooking up a lot of young riders, myself included, by helping them get noticed by teams looking for talent. The first thing I did when I hit the hill the next day was track him down to apologize. I hung my head low and said, "Dude, I'm so sorry about last night." Coughlin's response was, "Don't worry about it. It had nothing to do with you. We were pissed at Palmer." And with the weight lifted, I was ready to compete. I saw my parents on the side of the pipe when I practiced, and I felt that overwhelming nervousness that had ruined me in my very first vert skating contest back in college. My legs started to shake, probably from hiking the pipe and not drinking any water all day or eating, but I equated it to the jitters. At the top of the pipe, I walked away from everyone and tried to pull myself together. I envisioned myself falling all over the place, making a fool of myself in front of my parents and letting down the team. I looked at my older, more seasoned teammates, and they seemed so confident and carefree as they prepared to drop in, so I tried to adopt that attitude. I strutted over to the pipe, took a deep breath, and I did my thing. Fortunately, I had a great practice run. And then another, just stringing tricks together. When the pipe closed for practice, I replayed my practice runs over and over in my head, and I tried not to think about anyone for fear that it would trip me up and trip out my facade of total confidence. When the competition began, I was one of the first riders to go. And damned if I didn't fall. Seriously, I didn't fall. I felt pretty good and sat back to watch the other riders do their runs, figuring I'd learned something. There was a little 15-year-old from Norway named Terje Håkansson who dropped in and blew away the crowd with airs that seemed to be a little bit bigger than everyone else's, and even bigger more so because of his size. He was a tiny little guy. And he showed, so this is the first time I ever met Terje. Terje showed up with this other Norwegian woman rider named Ashild Loftus. And Terje was just like this tiny little kid. And he was there with a shield, and he couldn't speak any English. He was a Burton rider, and like Jason Ford and Brushy and those dudes would like try to teach him the worst English ever. Like the worst shit you could ever say to people. Everyone who watched him ride that day suspected that they might be watching the next Craig Kelly. Youth combined with skill is a very scary combo, and his attitude was cool as ice. Here I was, freaking out, terrified of my next run, and Terje was just enjoying himself. When all the scores were tallied, I found my name for the first time as a qualifier in the finals of the US Open. Making the finals was a huge weight lifted off my shoulders, and I actually enjoyed the recognition for about a half hour. Then the main event began. Before my run, I told myself once again to ride like I was practicing. At the top of the pipe, it was tunnel vision. I didn't look over at my parents or the crowd, and as I entered the pipe, I shut out the world, and everything I'd been practicing came together. I started off with a lean air, then an indie air, then an air to fakie, and then a gate twist, not too high, but I tried to keep everything smooth like Roche. And most important, I made sure that I didn't forget to do my hand plant. At the bottom, it was like someone turned the volume back up because I could suddenly hear the crowd. Mickey ran up to me after my run and said, look at the scores, you're in second. And I was like, second to what? And she slapped me on the head and said, second place. Brushy was in the top spot, but then Palmer came down and soon bumped him to second, so I was now in third. And Mickey was jumping around, still screaming, you're in third, you're still in the top three. Then it was Craig's turn. Mr. Consistent took first. I came in fourth, which was winning as far as I was concerned. I'd beaten back the evil dark side of my mind, and the other guys beat me with bigger airs, but their tricks weren't super technical compared to mine. I just thought I'd have to grow a bigger set and go bigger out of the pipe next time, I thought. Mickey was patting me on the back, and my mom and dad gave me hugs. I was on top of the world. Plus, I'd won $500. I didn't know it then, but the guys I stood alongside with on that winner's podium would go down in history as some of the most influential freestyle riders in the history of the sport. That would come to mean almost as much as my parents being there to see it. So there's the podium from that US Open. So there's Craig, there's Palmer, there's Brushy, there's myself, and there's Jimmy Scott right there. That's the top 5 from that comp. I was really, really, really stoked. After the awards ceremony, Kevin Kinnear, founding editor of Transworld Snowboarding, told my mom and dad, Todd's a big up-and-comer. Congratulations on whatever you've done to get him here. Even though my parents had never really taken my snowboarding or skating seriously, they had pulled through that winter with travel expenses and emotional support. I was sponsored by Sims, but I was also sponsored by mom and dad. More importantly, sponsored by mom and dad. Despite their reluctance over the years, they've always come through with equipment and money, and they instilled a work ethic that I transferred into fun things, like learning new tricks. I also couldn't overlook the fact that they first introduced me to the art of sliding on snow. I was determined to master that art and someday actually win the US Open with them in the crowd. Big plans coming from a kid who a few hours earlier was a nervous wreck. Competition stress, I sensed, would be my greatest nemesis. All right, so that's going to do it for tonight's, and here's what we got for tomorrow. What is that? What's that say? Team, Mom, Dad, and Sims. Emotional roller coaster. Okay, well, I hope you guys are having fun doing whatever it is you're doing. It's kind of boring, this whole quarantine thing. Where we are here in Encinitas, we've got 1 or 2 beaches open, which is kind of rad. But for the most part,
I go street skating with my daughter. Actually, there's a library down the street, and she's stoked because she's starting to skate again, and she learned how to do slappies the other day, so that was a pretty big deal for me. So we just been waxing curbs and doing slappies. Skate parks are closed too. Everything's closed. So I guess I'm just gonna have to watch the Weird Tiger show on Netflix, just like the rest of you guys, because I need to figure out what the hell's going on with that. And yeah, so we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, this will be up pretty soon.